Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has just stunned CNBC as he's announced a $100 billion investment into OpenAI. Check this out.
So let's dive right in to the news. Jensen, Nvidia is making a $100 billion investment in OpenAI and working together to build out, I think you're saying 10 gigawatts of capacity over several years. The investment's going to come with the gigawatts, one at a time. You're telling me, you guys, as quickly as you guys can get it done. Jensen, first of all, set the stage. Why?
This is the biggest AI infrastructure project in history. This is the largest computing project in history. Well, the reason for that is because computing demand is going through the roof for OpenAI. You know, ChatGPT is the single most revolutionary AI project in history. It's being used everywhere, every industry, every country, every person practically that I know uses ChatGPT. The computing demand is going through the roof. And so this partnership is about building an AI infrastructure that enables AI to go from the labs into the world. This is about the AI industrial revolution arriving. Yeah. It's a very big deal.
$100 billion, a lot of money. Sam, Greg, you guys are used to dealing with a lot of money in big projects. So Sam, I think it was just 8 months and a day ago, the initial Stargate announcement talking about the overall move that OpenAI is making in building out this capacity. Where does this fit?
So as Jensen said, building this infrastructure is critical to everything we want to do. Without doing this, we cannot deliver the services people want. We can't keep making better models. And now that we really see what's on the near-term horizon of how good the models are getting, the new use cases that are being enabled, what people want to do, this is like the fuel that we need to drive improvement, to drive better models, to drive revenue, everything. So this is helping us get to a world, along with our partners at Stargate, Microsoft, Oracle, where we can build out increasing amounts of infrastructure to deliver on what the world is demanding out of these services. There's like no partner but Nvidia that could do this at this kind of scale, at this kind of speed. It's really like quite incredible. But this will expand on the Stargate ambitions and let us push further and further. We have found every step along the way that we did not quite set our sights big enough, given the market demand. So this will help us push towards that next level. The compute constraints that the whole industry has been, and our company in particular, have been terrible. We're so limited right now in the services we can offer. There's so much more demand than what we can do. And as we look forward another year or 2 years, if you have, let's say it takes 10 gigawatts of compute or 5 gigawatts of compute, you could choose one of two things. You could choose to cure cancer by having AI do a bunch of research, or you could choose to offer free education to everybody on Earth. No one wants to make that choice. And so increasingly as we see this, the answer is just much more capacity so that we can serve the massive needs and opportunity with this.
Greg, one way of measuring that demand is the number of users that OpenAI has. ChatGPT says somewhere between 700 and 800 million. How quickly are you growing? What's the technology that you guys need to bring to bear, from Nvidia included, in order to satisfy that?
Yeah, so 700 million, growing extremely quickly. Like, I think that ChatGPT has grown from nothing to that scale, and it continues to grow faster than any product in history. And really, the reason we were able to make this breakthrough and serve it to the extent that we have is by leveraging NVIDIA's platform. Like, we've worked together very closely since Jensen actually hand-delivered a server to us back in 2016.
We'll come back to this point towards the end of the show, but it looks like Elon Musk isn't too happy about the news of Nvidia investing into OpenAI. What, though, I do want to ask you first about, Hans, is Nvidia seems to be going a little bit beyond chips. They recently invested in Intel. They've just invested in OpenAI. They previously had made an investment into CoreWeave and also ARM. So Nvidia's currently dominating the picks and shovels. It now looks like they're going to be owning a piece of the pie for the products and services as well. So Hans, what do you make of that?
Well, honestly, I think at this point, Jensen is just kind of showing off. He's obviously one of the best CEOs on the planet right now, perhaps second only to Elon. Although, Jensen has the benefit of focusing all of his efforts purely on NVIDIA. He doesn't have split attention between a number of different companies like Elon does, which puts NVIDIA in a very powerful competitive position. When I look at Jensen, what I see is someone who is hell-bent on becoming the Steve Jobs of this AI computing platform shift that we are right now in the midst of. He is trying to build out the biggest and most robust AI computing ecosystem in existence, bar none. And he's trying to do for the AI computing platform shift what the iPhone, iOS, and then the App Store did in total to provide the platform for mobile computing that we saw just completely break out in the 2010s. And it enabled so many different new products, new services, new companies to emerge. Social media would not be what it is today without the iPhone and the mobile app store. We wouldn't have companies like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all sorts of different things, Instagram, WhatsApp, Signal, Facebook. None of these companies would be what they are without that. And all of that was, like I said, really just enabled by this platform that Apple was able to build. And of course, that drove competition from other participants like Google. So then you had the Android phones and all of the other people that were trying to keep up. But the innovation was largely driven by Apple. And a lot of that Web 2.0 boom that we saw was due to the ecosystem that they built out. And I think that's how Jensen is thinking about this. He's really trying to build out the deepest and broadest ecosystem that he can that's very vertically integrated. It's tightly coupled between hardware and software, and it allows new companies, new products, new services to be built on top of that. And OpenAI and ChatGPT are, one of the first big breakout product market fit examples for this new AI platform shift. But I think this is going to continue to extend much further than that. And like you said, as we've been watching, Jensen really has been investing heavily in the picks and shovels side of all of that infrastructure. But this investment into OpenAI is definitely somewhat different than that, because it is actually somehow an investment into the products and services that are going to be built on top of that ecosystem, which is slightly different than anything that we've seen before, and maybe even slightly different than anything that we saw Steve Jobs do with Apple in the early days of the iPhone ecosystem. So, it is a little bit of a circular investment that they're investing into a company that then is going to use that investment to buy their chips and then build more software and hardware infrastructure. One of the big strategic things that this does is this keeps Sam and OpenAI really in the game, and it keeps them in the game in a way that is really independent of a lot of other players. Sam has always been dependent on other people like Microsoft in order to get access to the compute infrastructure that they have needed in order to build ChatGPT and the other things that they've been building. And not only to build those things, but then to serve those things to customers so that they can make revenue. And what it looks like now is that OpenAI has potentially reached escape velocity in this partnership with Nvidia, to where they'll be able to have access to all of the computing infrastructure that they need themselves, and it dramatically reduces their dependence on any other hyperscaler in order to be able to grow and to serve their customers and continue to advance the frontier of artificial intelligence research. And now that Jensen has signaled this willingness to invest into the data center build out for some of these strategic players in the AI space, we'll have to watch closely and see if there's a similar follow-up deal that gets announced with Elon for XAI here in the next few months, which I would not rule out as a distinct possibility. Now, that said, one of the things that was unclear in this announcement is how much of this 10 gigawatts of compute that OpenAI is talking about is directly part of the Stargate build out, which is being done with both Oracle and with Crusoe currently. My guess is that what they are doing here with this deal structure, and this is, somewhat unclear at this point in time, so take this with a grain of salt, is that Sam has worked directly with Jensen Huang to secure supply of all of the Nvidia chips that are going into that Stargate build out, whether that is with Oracle or with Crusoe or with any other partners. So I think that OpenAI is probably funding all of the other parts of the data center build out separately. That's going to include all of the buildings, all of the facilities, all of the power, all of the cooling, and all of the networking infrastructure that's not already going to be provided by NVIDIA. But as far as the chips and the networking that are coming directly from NVIDIA, what it looks to me like is that Jensen is just going to be giving those to OpenAI in exchange for OpenAI stock.
My next question for you, Hans, is what does this mean then for Nvidia's competition for someone like AMD? Nvidia owning a stake in OpenAI, is that going to potentially impact how much market share AMD is able to pick up over the years? Or will OpenAI still potentially be interested in some of the chips from AMD? And then what does it also mean for the rest of the other leading names in AI, albeit your Teslas, your Microsofts, your Googles, etc.?
Well, I would definitely say that Jensen's deals that have been made here over the past week and some change definitely are not good news for AMD or AMD investors. We'll start with the Intel deal first. Intel is obviously a company that is a much more direct competitor to AMD than Nvidia has been. Obviously, AMD and Nvidia both sell GPUs, but AMD has a whole host of other business that really competes a lot more with Intel than it does with Nvidia. And this now allows Nvidia to have market access through Intel to directly compete against AMD in some of its other core businesses that previously didn't have any exposure to competition with Jensen Huang in any way, shape, or form. And Jensen has shown himself to be a fierce competitor. Now, that said, Intel's foundry business has hit a lot of bumps in the road recently. So there are big question marks around whether or not Intel's foundries can deliver on time at high enough levels of quality and low enough costs in order to really put any pressure on AMD. So, this is not necessarily just a given that Nvidia will now be pressuring AMD's core business much more, but there is a possibility there. It's not something that anyone who is invested in AMD should take lightly. And then this deal with OpenAI is a much bigger deal than that. So the announcement that OpenAI recently had with Oracle to invest $300 billion worth of the Stargate build-out with Oracle specifically, it was kind of assumed, or at least I had kind of assumed, that at least a portion of that $300 billion was going to get allocated to AMD, simply because from a cost standpoint, it makes sense. And you would think that OpenAI would want to diversify their hardware stack. But after this announcement with Nvidia and knowing that Nvidia is basically going to take OpenAI stock in return for Nvidia chips, well, that really flips those assumptions on their head. I would assume now that basically every single Stargate chip for inference and for training that is going to be built out over the next several years is going to be done purely on NVIDIA hardware and inside the CUDA ecosystem, which is really a big win for Jensen to lock down that main competitor and main customer in that space, just 100% inside of his ecosystem. It really does drive up the value of that ecosystem, and it is a shot across the bow for AMD that just goes to show the lengths that Jensen Huang is willing to go to in order to secure market share in this exploding new segment of chip demand. On the flip side, this could be a signal that NVIDIA is running out of organic demand growth, and that's one of the reasons why they're having to dip into that war chest in order to self-fund the growth of this next wave of compute. But either way, it does put a lot of pressure on Microsoft, on Amazon, and on Google as other big hyperscalers that now are going to have to compete not only amongst each other, not only against Elon, but then also against Sam. So I would say this is really a big win for AI overall, even though those other hyperscalers are going to see increased competition. And then to move more towards Tesla, I don't think that Tesla's going to be impacted in a big way, at least here in the near term, from this deal, except for in a roundabout way through XAI, which we'll talk about some more later.
My last question for you, Hans, is on Elon Musk and Sam Altman. We've seen that Elon Musk has written that he is a little bit concerned about this investment from Nvidia into OpenAI. Why do you think he's concerned? Obviously, these two have got a bit of beef, but this probably isn't going to be very good news for Elon, is it?
Well, before we get into talking about the beef between Elon and Sam, I think one of the things that we have to recognize is just how much Jensen Huang loves XAI, loves Colossus, because these projects are things that Elon is doing that really push the entire industry forward. They really up the ante on this arms race that everyone is involved in. And he's the only one who's been able to take these big announcements of data centers that are going to be built and bring them into reality, and not just bring them into reality, but bring them into reality much more quickly and much more aggressively than other people, and even than expectations have been set for him. And so that is something that I think Jensen really appreciates, because it does force other people now to have to try to keep up. And I think that's why we've seen so many of these other announcements that are following on the heels of the execution that we've seen from Elon and XAI and Colossus. That said, I don't think Jensen wants Elon to be the only player who is able to build these data centers at these scales. I think that he does want to make sure that Elon has some competition. And so I think this is a really smart competitive move from Jensen Huang's standpoint to help make sure that the entire ecosystem has some balance to it and is not getting too lopsided. So while, yes, this makes complete sense for Jensen Huang from Nvidia's position, I'm sure that this is quite annoying for Elon Musk. You know, after all of the drama between him and Sam over the last few years, I'm sure that one of the things he was hoping for was to really drive up the price of continuing to be a major player in this game above what OpenAI could sustain, and leave Elon really competing just against other large players like Microsoft, Amazon, potentially Meta, and then definitely Google. And so the fact that Jensen Huang has now stepped in and really kept Sam in the game, and as we've said, not just in the game, but a significant player in the game who's able to be completely independent of any of those other players, is something that Elon did not want to see. This is going to be something that frustrates him. But that said, he is an extreme competitor, and I think this will push him forward in his plans for Colossus and for XAI at a very rapid pace. Now, the only thing that this might change for him, to circle back to Tesla, is if Elon takes this personally from Jensen, it may really motivate him also to really lean even harder into developing the AI6 and Dojo 3 roadmap at Tesla, and potentially deepen the relationship then between Tesla and XAI for compute as well, depending on how flexible they can make the AI6 and Dojo 3 architecture to be something that really works for other types of workloads besides this embodied in the car, in the robot, and in the data center real-world AI training infrastructure and inference infrastructure. But we'll just have to see how that plays out. I mean, Jensen is still such an incredible competitor. He's got so many customers and such a large ecosystem that even with Elon's full attention, I think it might be difficult for him to really displace NVIDIA's position within his AI ambitions with the AI6 and Dojo 3 architecture, or even subsequent architectures thereafter. I mean, this is just something that Jensen is laser focused on, and NVIDIA has been out executing everyone in, including Elon, now for a number of years. Before we wrap, I have to say a huge thank you to my co-host, David. Besides being a great co-host with a great accent, David has been one of the key figures behind the scenes helping me to grow this channel from 1,000 to over 16,000 subscribers, and to put out regular shows that reach millions of views every year. When he's not moonlighting with me, he usually works with businesses who want to leverage YouTube to grow their online presence, and he's looking to take on more. If you want to get more clients and more brand awareness for your business using YouTube, I definitely recommend him. You can book a free call with him using the link in the description below.